Have you ever wondered why my channel name's The Sandwich Coder? No? You just found my channel? Well, I guess then you should subscribe. Well, when I made my channel, I wanted to make games, and I thought I would participate more in game jams, which is why there's jam on the channel logo. But I guess as I continued the channel, I lost my sense of purpose, making other videos that made me forget why I love programming so much. So that's why your boy realized he has done nothing productive this summer and decided to participate in If you don't know, the GMTK Game Jam is one of the most popular game jams, with it getting 10,000 submissions and only being hosted once a year. After the game jam, the games are rated based on 5 categories: creativity, enjoyment, narrative, artwork, and audio by the community, and then the top entries get featured in his video. My goal of this video was originally to get featured in his video so that, I could help out smaller creators like him, since everyone knows I'm so much more popular, so much more amazing, so much more better, so much more. But I realized that this was quite unrealistic, because it would make everyone unrealistically sad because, nobody stands a chance against me, and I'll just get first place in all categories, as well as second place and third place. And so instead, I decided to aim for a top 1000 since this would put me in the top 10%. Just note that this is my first game jam and I have never used a game engine or any actual painting software before, but I mean, how hard could it be, right? Well, so this was the first day of the jam and the theme was loops. Oh, loops. Well, maybe I could have a race car track and I make a car that goes in loops. Or maybe I can have a character that goes in a time loop. Fuck. You see, if I want any chance of getting to the top 1000, I would need to aim to score high in the first 2 categories, cause let's be honest, there's no way I'm getting any luck scoring with my MS Paint artwork, and my audio skills literally consist of taking shit off the internet, and my storytelling skills are equivalent to that of a 5-year-old. So in the end, I came up with this idea. What if we have a ball that can be carried by gears that turn in loops to a star? And then the aim of the game would be to change the attributes of the gear, like their size or how fast they spun, in order for the ball to actually get transported. Something like Polybridge, but with gears instead of a bridge. It was pretty simple, but I felt like if I expanded on the idea with other features, I could make it into an actual game. So I immediately got to work, downloading Godot and watching a tutorial because I have no clue how to use a game engine. I also feel like I should mention that the whole game has to be completed in 4 days. But I was sick for the first day, so I really only have 3 days of work. So I decided that the first day would be designated to getting the gameplay mechanics to work, with all the editing and physics. The second day would be for artwork and making the game look nice, and then the third day would be for other things like sound effects and extra polish. So the fact that I already spent an hour trying to learn how to use Godot was not really helping for my time crunch. But eventually, I started to work on the actual game, and with the help of ChatGPT, found out how to rotate what would soon be a gear, making the first little progress for the game. I quickly found out how to rotate the gears together, and saw how easy it was to edit the attributes of the gears, which I guess is one of the benefits of using a game engine. I then made some other features of the game, like a ball and a bucket, and gave them some temporary sprites that really demonstrated my emotional state. I ran the project and was pretty surprised to see everything working out the box. No need to create my own physics system or deal with any of the bugs, it just worked in the editor. And then I started to work on the in-game UI that lets us edit the attributes of the cogs. And with another tutorial and some fiddling, I was able to get the UI to fit on the screen, and after some more work, I was able to hook up the sliders to the cogs. I then found a bug which made it so that when you increase the size of the cog, the size of the bucket gets ridiculous, so I quickly fixed that. And then I added another slider to control the offset of the gears, but then I realized that it wasn't really clear how changing the attributes affected how the gears move, so I decided to add some dots to show the path of the gears when they actually did move. This showed some pretty interesting patterns which I thought I could use for future levels. But after my ADHD wore off, I decided to actually work on the system that lets you transition from editing to actually running the simulation, and honestly this was terrible. I first asked ChatGPT if there was a standard way to do this in a Godot, but he basically just said, nah bro, you gotta do it yourself. So what I did is just turn off the visibility for the UI when running the level and turning it back on when the player loses. This is pretty ugly because it means that the simulation script and the editing script for the cogs are in the same script. So the way to disable each part is to constantly check the level manager for the state of the game that the game is in. This is pretty terrible, But I didn't really have time to implement another solution, so I just had to go with it. Speaking of actually running the level, I added another button to the bottom of the UI which lets us play the simulation. But this is when I ran into another issue. Remember how I said I didn't need to code my own physics system? Well, it turns out Godot gives me no control over the physics system, and I can't reset the ball's position or velocity directly to reset the level. Otherwise, this happens. This was such a difficult problem to fix since I was used to having full control over the physics system. So I asked ChatGPT to help me, I looked up some Reddit articles, I asked ChatGPT to help me look up some Reddit articles. It got to the point where I did something I thought I would never do. Look at documentation. I know, terrible. But eventually I was able to iron out the bugs and convince the solver to let me set the position and velocity to 0 and reset the level. After this, I continued working on the editing setup, adding a little time slider to see how the simulation plays, and ironing out a few more bugs. And after my ADHD kicked in again, I finally got the editing and running setup working, so you can actually play the game. Well, not really, since there's no objective yet, which is why I started to work on the star, and you can see now that when you reach the star, the level resets. With that, I felt that it was finally time to work on the first level, which is a pretty simple level and just aims to show you the mechanics of the game. Here, I want to note that I took a lot of inspiration from a game made last year called Little Slime Blows Up, which actually won last year in the enjoyability category. So I looked into how he designed the levels using polygons and decided to do the same. Anyways, after making the tutorial level, I started to work on level 2 and the transition between the two levels, which I also borrowed, making a black screen that fades in and out. But aw crap, looks like the built-in physics system screwed me over again, because this time turning the second level invisible doesn't actually remove the colliders. So how do I fix this? Perfect. So now when I beat the level, it should... Where's the ball and star? I don't even remember how I fixed this one, but eventually it just stopped disappearing, so good job past me. It was getting late, so I decided to end the day by creating a few more levels and adding some more game mechanics like spikes and platforms and substars, which you need to collect before you get the main star. With these new levels, I got my brother to playtest it, and he said that most of the levels were okay, except for level 4 and 7, so I need to work on them the next day. So starting the day, I decided to immediately get started by downloading Photoshop and finding another tutorial to understand how to use it. Anyways, after that, I looked at Goodgiss's art since I really like his art style and I thought it was simple enough for me to replicate. What the fuck was I thinking? So after 5 minutes of learning how to make a circle, I finally got to work on making the gears, and this is how it turned out. And honestly, I thought it turned out pretty good for a first attempt, so I continued making the art for the player and the bucket. I felt like a ball didn't really suit the theme of the game, so I changed it into another smaller cog for some reason and imported all of them into the game. So this is how it looked before, and now this is how it looks. Next, I added an outline to the gear, added a temporary background which I ended up never changing, and a platform. I continued by making a few more platforms with different sizes and added them to the levels. After this, I got sick of the last ugly sprite, which was the star, so I changed them too and I made them bob up and down to show that they're collectible. I also thought that it wasn't clear that you needed to collect the substars before collecting the main star, so I made it so that the main star is translucent until you collect all the substars. I was feeling pretty good about the game now since it actually looked like a game instead of whatever this is. So I continued my streak by turning on another tutorial for particle effects and added them when you collect a star as well as when the player hits the spike. I then decided to take a break from the art and deal with some of the suggestions that my brother gave me yesterday, mainly about the one about level 4 being too hard, but instead of nerfing it, I decided to give the player some ghosts to trace a path after you run the simulation, and also made it so that you can see exactly where your player is in a point in time using the time slider. But he later playtested it again and said that being able to see with the player made it a bit too easy, so I removed it and made this stupid time slider useless again. Anyways, I then nerfed level 4 and decided to work on the UI since it was the only ugly thing left for me to fix, and just like that, the sliders and UI look much better. With that, it was getting late, but I quickly changed the spikes into a spinning gear since again, a spike didn't really fit the aesthetic. But with that, on to day So for day 3, I actually woke up late and I only started to work on the project at 1 p.m. But anyways, I started off by making the sprite wheel flash when you first enter the game in level 1, because I thought that wasn't very clear to click the gear from some earlier playtests. And I also added some text to tell the player to press escape in order to restart the level, which is another thing I anticipated was going to happen when I released the game. Remember, I need to make it as enjoyable and intuitive as possible, since that's one of the categories I'm trying to aim for. So continuing with that, I made locks to restrict the player's ability to change some certain attributes to make it a bit more straightforward for some levels, especially the ones with 2 cogs. But these locks are also used in the level design for later levels, so I thought that was pretty convenient. I then proceeded to make a few more levels using a new mechanic which allowed 2 independent cogs to exist. I know, what a revolutionary feature. But actually having more than 1 cog really opened the door to a lot of new ideas, which you can see here in the new levels that I made. Anyways, for the last level, I really wanted to show how interesting and dynamic the 2 cogs are. So to do this, I tried to find a configuration that made the 2 cogs trace out the path of a 5-point star. In fact, I wanted to do this so bad that I actually took an hour to find this arrangement, and in fact I took so long that I added a text box in order to make changing the values slightly easier. But anyways, after I found this configuration, I also realized that it would be literally impossible for anyone else to find this on their own, so I added a tip that just appears at the start of the level. 10 out of 10 game design, I know. Anyways, what was day 3 for? Oh right, sound effects. Okay, so I did my usual method of just downloading sound effects from online and even found this neat tool, JSFXR, which I used to make the death sound and a few of the collection sounds. But anyways, with some distortion, I got the gear sounds and ball rolling sounds to feel good enough. So after all that, I did my finishing touches, which include adding the music, which is actually the music that you heard in the first part of this video, which holy shit is the only lo-fi beat not made by AI, as well as the title screen and an ending screen. With that, I exported it to itch.io and submitted the game in a few hours before the submission deadline. Honestly, I was pretty proud of myself. After all, the last fully fledged game that I made was over a year ago, but we don't talk about that. With that, I want to go through some of the highlights of some of the games that I played because I felt like there were really some very good submissions. For example, Snake Eats Snake was a twist on the classic Snake game where you have to eat your own tail while consuming all the apples and avoiding the spikes. In the Loop is a game where you're a news company and the news that you release affects events that actually happen and the subsequent news that you can release. This game was really nice with the art style and everything, so I'm pretty impressed how they did this in 4 days. Curfew Zoo is a game where you're in the zoo and you have to take some pictures of some animals while avoiding the police, which was honestly pretty fun despite it not being that popular. Also, the sound effects were amazing.
Like to see a meerkat. How about
But anyways, how did I do? Well, honestly, for a first game jam, I thought I did alright. I got 687 and 730 plays for the 2 categories that I focused on, and the rest? Well, those aren't important. But I think I'm missing the point of game jams. The point of game jams isn't to be the best. It's a space where everyone feels invited, no matter how professional you are at making games. Everyone is given the same opportunity to show their talent. It's a space to grow, to develop, to learn, to explore, to discover. So with that, yeah, I'm changing my channel name to the Burger Coder because I'm never doing this shit again.